I am going to go ahead and get us started with a little intro. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today's webinar. We're going to talk through 4 New Year's resolutions for growth marketers to embrace in 2025. My name is Christina Rubino. I'm the GM of our offline marketing practice here at Right Side Up. For anybody not familiar with Right Side Up, we're a collective of marketing specialists who have helped more than 1,000 companies hit their growth goals. We span pretty much every marketing function that you can think of, from like performance and lifecycle, SEO, social, analytics, creative, offline media, to name a few. But I definitely want to, mention that, but enough about us. I'm going to get right into it and cover a few housekeeping items. Please note that all participants except the panelists are muted. It is a live panel discussion, so we don't want this to just be the 4 of us beaming out at you. We want your questions and thoughts, comments, concerns in the chat, and also please provide your questions. There's like a Q&A module that you'll appear throughout the webinar. Last, an email with the recording. This is being recorded. That email with the recording will be sent tomorrow, so look out for that email in your inbox. And all right, well, let's get right into it. I'm going to introduce who I have with me. I'm thrilled to have Chirag Singh, the Director of Growth Marketing at Reddit. If you want to introduce yourself, Chirag.
Sure. Thank you, Christina. Hi, everyone. I'm Chirag. I support the SMB Growth Marketing Program here at Reddit. I am responsible for the entire program across the entire funnel, encompassing acquisitions, onboarding, growth, and retention. And I've previously worked in similar roles in teams at Meta and Google. Have had the privilege of working across multiple teams in multiple countries, and now I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Awesome. Excited to have you on. I'm also excited to have my colleague, Matt Wynn, who's a principal consultant, joining us today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Matt. I've been at Right Side Up only a couple of months, but I come from about 20 years of industry experience at AWS, Alexa, and Autodesk, as well as Wrike and Smartsheet. So B2B SaaS for a long time.
Awesome. And then rounding out our panel, we have Ben Rose, who's a growth advisor at Right Side Up.
Hello, everyone. About 20-something years of experience growing companies like Pandora and also working Wyndham and lots of e-commerce, both B2C and B2B companies. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm absolutely stoked to get everybody here talking about topics and all that. Before we get started, I just want to take a quick poll of the audience. I think we're gonna, yep, there it is. Just want to know which of the New Year's resolutions that we've identified for us and for marketers in general are at the top of your priority list, because that might dictate where we spend a bunch of our time here today. I just want to make sure this is as relevant for everybody as possible. Ooh, oh, this is fun to watch in real time. It's diversify your channel marketing mix and harnessing AI as a strategic ally are neck and neck. Actually, missed opportunity. We totally should have been doing an over under or something here. Sweet. All right, awesome. So I'm going to spend a lot of time on the first and last topics, and then hit on some of the other New Year's resolutions that we've outlined here. Also, don't mind me, my coffee is still metabolizing, but I'm just about a real person. All right, so let's actually get straight into it. Thank you. The results this is great. I just shared the results. Thanks everybody for participating. Oh, good. We've got a lot of engaged people here. Perfect. Sweet. So just to get right into diversifying our channel mix, I think that, there's obviously different pressures in your media mix and marketing mix that might contribute to helping you think okay, I've either hit diminishing returns in one channel, or the common refrain I get from a lot of marketers is I'm uncomfortable with how much of my media spend I have in any one given channel. It's my workhorse, but what if something happens? What if something happens to TikTok, which will never happen in a few days here. But Matt, gonna hit you up first. When do you know it's time to introduce a new channel rather than just continuing to optimize within an existing channel?
So I look at it in sort of 2 ways. Number one is in an ideal space or an ideal place, we're always testing new channels. There should be that continuous motion. And yeah, I know this is sort of, there might be a question about this later, but I always try to reserve 10% or 8%, something around there, of my marketing budget to test and find those new channels and to always be learning, whether it's podcasts or any of the other inline TV that's starting to come out. There's a whole bunch of stuff that many of us don't get the opportunity to test unless we're really smart about carving out that budget ahead of time. So I think there's the always be testing model and the always be expanding. But then I really like to look at on a given, say on LinkedIn, if I have some copy or some campaigns that didn't work, can I take that over to Instagram or Meta or TikTok or Reddit and see if there's better resonance with that content with that user there. So I like to sort of make sure that I'm using all the avenues to test, like, is my message good, or is it just deployed in the wrong place?
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense, I think. And if anybody else wants to chime in, feel free. I saw a little bit of that, but yeah, it definitely makes sense. And one of my follow-up questions, because I'm always curious about this, maybe Chirag or Ben or Matt, whoever wants to take this one. When you think about persuading your leadership team or the rest of marketing or whoever needs to buy into the new channels to invest in them, how do you go about building a strong business case to help make it happen?
I can, take a stab.
Awesome.
So again, like Matt called out, at the end of the day, testing budgets are now very, very common. It's a very common line item across all marketing programs, even like small, medium budgets programs. You would see like there is appetite for testing out new things.
Yeah.
And in many cases, as you think about building out a business case internally, it usually starts with an opportunity to test out a small scale pilot, really to get a signal on whether it's a new channel, whether it's new campaign type, ad format, anything specific to a particular channel, and what's the ability of that work stream or that initiative to really drive impact for your business, right? So when it comes to building out sort of business cases internally, it starts with having a very clear understanding of what you're trying to do, who you're trying to reach, and
Hmm.
what you want that audience to do, right? And uh, once there is that high level of conviction within the marketing team or the growth marketing team, uh, it becomes relatively easy to think about, hey, how do I leverage my existing test line item in my budget to try out a new channel, try out a new program, or alternatively go in and build out a business case about, hey, I know my audience, I know they are on this particular channel, or I can reach them via this particular tactic, and then sort of building out a pilot around that with a clear budget ask.
Yeah. I mean,
I think that
it makes it,
I'd love to
please,
add on to that in that
please.
I love your point about what is the size of this test and whether that's the test needs to be large enough to hit a certain significance, but also in terms of potential impact, like, is this something that just applies to this channel or does it apply, across channels or across the entire organization? I think that's important to think about. And I also think in terms of the testing budget, when I'm working with finance, I try to proactively say, we expect this budget to perform poorly because we want 75-ish, six, 2/3 to 3/4 of our tests to fail, right? If all our tests are winning, we're not trying hard enough. We're just kind of doing what we were doing. So it's important to really set aside that budget and say, we're really going to try different things here. And most will probably not work, but when it works, we'll get a really valuable new insight.
I think I always joke around and say I'm a woman who likes her expectations managed. I think in general, like there's also the old like under promise and over deliver. If you're
Sure.
not setting that expectation, and also to Matt's point earlier, if you're not budgeting a certain percentage of your budget for test budgeting, and then all of a sudden everybody's feeling like this test is really high stakes, and whether or not the test fails or succeeds becomes like an uncomfortable combination of factors where you're like, oh, well, this marketing spend needs to perform. And it's like, well, then you probably shouldn't have invested it in an experimental test, because what we're trying to learn here is where to invest next. Like you said, Ben, like we're looking for a path forward for iterative testing. And if everything looks great, then we're not stretching ourselves. I absolutely love that. And actually, I was gonna ask Ben this, but like could kick it out to everybody as well. But Ben, what are some of like the tools and methodologies and approaches that you recommend utilizing to measure performance when you're, when you're adding new channels to the mix, but just in general, like I think we can all agree attribution are shades of wrong. Sorry if
Sure.
anybody is married to any
Oh,
one type of attribution methodology. I'm sorry to burst your bubble.
well, it's funny. I spent a long time going deep in attribution, and one of the things that I counsel companies on is like, how much of your resources and mental energy do you want to focus on attribution versus other aspects of your business, right?
Mm,
That's something to like consider that in the overall balance. But in terms of testing and measurement methodologies, um, I do, you have to kind of right size it for what is your business, right? What is the volume you're doing? How much are you going to do? Like I have some companies who, I would love for them to use MMM, but their conversion volume is not high enough to
mhm.
get the signal there. But what I do see a lot of companies doing is, look, like the digital based attribution even at its peak in 2015, 2017, like peak data tracking still had a lot of gaps, right? And those gaps are significantly larger today, right? So I don't tend to steer companies towards multi-channel attribution if they have a volume of conversions. I tend to steer them more towards a combination of testing and MMM. And there are new testing options. Like it doesn't have to be straight up like state by state geo tests. You can, if you're mostly in lower funnel channels, you can do it at the zip level. You can do ID matching, right, with a partner and do your tests that way. So you can test at all different levels. And then from an MMM standpoint, a lot of what I see happening and getting traction right now is moving away from the traditional once a quarter consulting firm, MMM. It's once a quarter, 2 months late. It's highly accurate, but it's too late to do anything about it. The business has moved on, right? And I see them, moving into things like recast and keen and measured and more of this kind of like
Yeah.
weekly MMM results, which is most of the accuracy, but a lot more actionable from a timing standpoint. So those are some things that I see happening right now that I think are really positive movements in measurement.
Yeah, I really agree with a lot of what you said there, Ben. I think we can all agree that attribution is largely crap. Like there and we live in a multi-channel world where we're getting messages about everything from 1,000 different places, and it's really hard to rely on digital tracking to fill those gaps. But one thing that I really like to do, to Ben's point, is geo testing on the zip code or state or city or zip code level or DMA generally, and it's you can test different combinations of media. You can hold out different things and really start to understand the impact of different messages on the entire halo. So I think that that's one way I like to in also to Ben's point, when you're looking at it that way, you can do some tracking day over day, week over week to start to understand the broader effect, that you're having from the multiple touch points.
Yeah. It's a these are all apt points, and like attribution is only as good as the data that you're also using that's first party to gut check it. This is also why I advise a lot of brands to enable post-purchase surveys or post-conversion surveys, just because it's probably the most resilient form of attribution data you're going to get because it's all first party owned, right? The only thing that governs it is really your privacy policy. The other thing is I've seen it back up like spike-based I can't talk today. Probably good timing for this. Spike-based methodology for like channels like linear television, or backup view-through based like pixel-based methodology like you'd use with
Yep.
Meta or even in podcasts. So it's like there are ways. I always tell people, I'm like, if any one source of attribution is telling you something that is so dissonant from the rest of your measurement mix, or if it seems too good to be true. Like my favorite thing is when people look at single channel measurement and they're like, I should sink all of my money into this channel. And you're like, single channel measurement. I don't know if I feel that way. I don't know if I do that with anything at this point.
It's interesting how the measurement piece aligns with the like new channel testing, right?
Yeah.
Because very often it's like, well, okay, we want to try this new thing, but we don't know how to measure it yet, right? And so
Yep.
depending on how, that can be a limiting factor in terms of how many new channels you try in a year if you don't have some kind of comprehensive measurement in place. So for example, if you're doing weekly MMM, right, it is easier, right, to test new channels from a standpoint of setup. However, it requires probably a higher volume of spend to test that channel. Conversely, if you're doing point-to-point solutions to test a new channel about how it's performing, it's maybe not uniform across all of your business in terms of like how are we measuring the results, and it might take more setup time, right? So there's always kind of a balance to play there where you have to look at your business across the year and what are you trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And
Sorry, it boils down to just
please.
thinking that, what are your more tenured, more established channels where you're putting in a lot of investments already? What is the level of specificity that you want in terms of tracking, measurement, attribution on those channels versus where do you need a strong enough signal to just run with it, right? Like in many cases, there are more sophisticated measurement technologies, but it'll require so much of investment in that straight away. In many cases, it wouldn't even fit in a pilot bucket initially, just based on the testing budget sector, right? So
Exactly.
it's about like, moving fast and getting things done at the same point of time. How much do you want to, how much really, how much of a resource or investment do you want to put behind just purely from a measurement standpoint for something that just might be a new thing that works out well or not? And you just need a strong enough signal to figure out if you want to run with it next quarter or not.
Yeah, I always tell people, I'm like, listen, if your measurement budget for any given tactic or test comprises a not insignificant part of the media budget, you might shoot yourself in the foot with that, because you might actually wind up not being able to spend it. If it's a paid media test, might wind up not being able to spend enough on paid media to get it measured. And then actually shameless plug for upcoming content. We actually are partnering with the team at Recast to write a guide for how to diversify and measure channels during diversification, which I actually wasn't thinking about until Ben said his point and mentioned Recast by name, that I would share that
Love
here.
those guys.
They're brilliant dudes.
Yeah.
And like interestingly, these kind of lightweight MMM tools, like I love and use Recast. There's obviously other ones. I'm also seeing a lot of marketers start using platforms like House, et cetera. But it's just there's a lot of squishiness around the very technical term. I'm sure Michael Kaminsky would love me using that. There's a lot of squishiness around how we enable MMM and MTA to make marketing decisions, especially when we're doing new channel testing. So we literally have written something so long that it's turned into an ebook. So keep an eye out for that if you're in the chat. We'll be sharing that here in the next couple of months. The last thing for this section, want to just go quick round robin. What often overlooked channels should growth marketers explore adding to their marketing mix this year? And I'll start with Matt.
Not to toot my colleague's horn here, but I'm a big fan of Reddit lately. We're starting to see, I think for a number of reasons, but we're starting to see really favorable CPCs on Reddit as compared to LinkedIn, and if you get the targeting right in terms of the subreddits that you're targeting, and there's some real goodness to be found there. So I've been pushing more and more dollars that way, and I see that really continuing.
I'm glad that payoff before the webinar started really worked out. Totally, guys. This is just one big plug for Reddit ads. Imagine that. I love that. As somebody who spends too much time on Reddit, I support this. But yeah, Ben or Chirag?
I'll jump in and second the recommendation about Reddit, but I would also look at, I think podcasts offer a lot of value, especially with host reads. You have like a low creative overhead and a lot of credibility that comes with those. So I think that is still a good channel that does not get used as much as it should. And I would also, although they do not serve ads from an organic standpoint, I think brands really should start thinking about Blue Sky this year.
So completely agree with Matt and with Ben on Reddit ads. So of course, no doubt about it.
No, wait, really? That's so weird.
So, primarily from my standpoint, I would say there is definitely a podcast. That's something that we are experimenting with in this year as well. But at the same point of time, in B2B environments, which is predominantly the area that I've been in, having a clear understanding of your audience and how you can get deeper there, those are the channels that really are focused for us and a lot of other folks in the industry that I've been having conversations with lately. There is a huge push behind industry-specific newsletters. There's a huge push behind thinking about how we can leverage that from a demand gen standpoint. And of course, I think CTV, potentially, this really could be the year where a lot of more ABM money start, getting moving in that direction, especially as we think over the last 1 year, B2B focused platforms like LinkedIn have really ramped up their video inventory and options with which advertisers can go out and really build out high quality video assets and different formats to, drive more demand gen, more upper funnel focus campaigns. So I would say perhaps these 2 or 3 would be my big ones that I would call out here.
I'm also glad that the payoff that I did for everybody on mentioning podcast, which I wasn't expecting anybody to mention, that was going to be mine, because Host Red Advertising has built a lot of businesses that I've been privileged to work on. But I will also throw in the mix streaming audio. It's often overlooked because it's like, oh, it's just Pandora and Spotify. It's not. It's streaming radio. There's a lot of ad-supported content out there that's audio specific that is under monetized. And so there are partners that we work with that you've never even heard of. But CPMs are really favorable. Targeting is as accurate as any targeting is, but like still fairly accurate. So I always tell marketers to think about streaming audio as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to move
one,
us to the,
sorry, just one
no,
other thing that I'm excited about from a new channel this year is
Yeah.
LinkedIn has just started releasing into beta inline TV using LinkedIn targeting. So that's going to be,
Oh.
using video on, YouTube TV and into a whole bunch of other properties to, be able to target on TV using job titles and seniority. Like that's just a huge step forward. So I'm really excited about that this year too.
Yeah, I always tell people to not sleep on linear as well. Like,
Mm.
also I realize like now we've just mentioned like most of the channels besides Meta and Google. I think the moral of this story is like diversify your marketing spend. The answers may surprise you. Just go with
Yeah,
most
everything is to a certain extent overlooked beyond Meta and Google because there's so much of the marketplace and are, off come with their own tracking solutions, right?
We love an easy tracking solution. I mean, I even tell marketers still when they're like, how do I do an experiment? When it's like, I really want to do this like blah, blah, blah test. I'm like, dude, use Meta's tool. Why are you like trying to like make
I mean, right, to this
decisions?
same token,
Yeah.
it's like, Pinterest has stepped up a lot in their
I've heard
measurement
that,
game.
yeah.
And so there's opportunity there as well, I think.
Awesome. I'm in fairness, I do have a producer behind me that's like, she's like, I'm like, yeah, we said we were going to focus on Diversify a little bit more based on interest. I also promise that I will focus a little bit more on AI later on, but just thinking about like when, master your marketing budget is what we called it. But let's just get straight into when we think about budgeting for the year. I'll kick this out to Matt. How often do you reforecast revenue and adjust your budget throughout the year?
So ideally, it's a continuous process. So the best practice, I hate saying that, is really on like a biweekly basis to be, in most cases, to be sitting down, looking at a rolling 4 weeks of data, making sure that all your assumptions are in line, and then correcting if they're not, and working with finance partners and leadership to make sure that you're again setting expectations properly of what we think is going to happen based on the latest data and what we are going to have to do to get back to a path to green. So it's a continuous process, but my favorite way to look at it is sort of on a bi-weekly rolling 4 weeks, removes a lot of the variance and helps you really see the forest for the trees.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think it's like just always being responsive to what you're observing in the marketplace. And also like it gives you the opportunity to flex things up and down and around as different channels like rise or fall in prominence or, rise or fall in accuracy. I think we've had so many curveballs thrown at marketers in the last like 4 to 5 years that were like, if you would have asked me 4 years ago where I thought most of the brands that I work with would be investing, I don't think I would have predicted any of their marketing mixes. based on the platforms that were like super prominent then, you know? So it's just like, always be ready to adjust. And even within channels, I tell people this all the time. I'm like, dude, you know, I'll use podcasts as an example just because we deal with this every day. There are times where we'll get wind of like a really important guest appearing on a show. And it might be an additional episode that's released on, for example, like Rogan's feed or something, right? And you're like, oh, well, we weren't going to buy that ad, but like, oh, geez, it's like a huge guess that this person's getting. So like, we might want to actually think about plussing up and testing this. You have to make the decision really fast, right? We've literally had 48 to 72 hours to make this decision before, but it's those kinds of opportunities in your mix that it's like, you don't want to be on the other side of that. Like I've sponsored stuff where it's like presidential candidates have appeared, or you know, a celebrity that's like releasing a new album or something will appear on the show as like a surprise to the general audience and the general public, and you're like, I did that. So it's nice to leave room in the budget for those kinds of surprises. Awesome. And
Yeah.
then just, oh, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, when I'm working with clients and we're talking about annual budgets and things like that, I often say, like, the idea that you're going to have an accurate prediction of how much you're going to spend in any given channel over the course of a year is like just a complete waste of effort, right? Because if you're doing it right, you're going to optimize based on the performance that you see, right?
That's it.
So you have like, this is a general guideline, but don't hold me to it's going to be this much in, Google Shopping versus this much in something else. It's like, we're going to see where the performance is and we're going to move. And to your point about, those special things that come up, I think it's also, not every spot within a channel is equal. So, when we're talking about like linear TV and people are like, oh, okay, well, we're going to buy some games. And it's like, which game you buy really makes a difference.
Yeah. And this is where also like, it does make a huge difference. And it also, these are like the little make or break things as the part of your strategy over the year, where it's like, oh, you can look back sometimes and be like, oh man, if we didn't do that, I actually don't know how well that channel would have performed. Or like to your point, Ben, about collaborating, like just aligning on marketing performance and aligning investment on marketing performance. How do you work with finance to help? Because like a lot of the time, I think I don't want to say like marketers get a bad name for how we work with finance, but there's definitely ways to approach the relationship with finance that gives everybody like more investment in KPIs and more understanding of everything. So it's a little easier for everybody to get on board when you do want to make those shifts.
Yeah. So I think aligning on a methodology as soon as possible is really important. Um, I also think from a forecasting standpoint, I've seen various ways that forecasts are done in companies, from, literally finance says the forecast and says, here's 20%, right? To, completely marketing driven. What I actually like is when I see, different parts of the organization. So maybe it's like finance, marketing, and sales, or finance, marketing, and product, or something like that, all running their own forecasts and then meeting and saying, well, why do you think that this is what's going to happen in April? Oh, because we're releasing a new product, right? And having that discussion. So if you have a regular cadence between the people who are doing the forecast for those departments, and you come up with kind of like an ensemble model there, and you say, okay, now we're getting close. In companies that do that, and I've been a part of some of these internally and helped counsel others externally, I see the forecasts become much more accurate because they're taking in more consideration to what's going on with the business. And then the third thing that I think is really important is to communicate marketing performance frequently and proactively, right? So you're not just communicating up to your CMO about what's going on, you're also working with your finance partners and saying, this is what we see is happening. And just, it's like a messaging thing, right? If you're only talking to them once a quarter, well, I can guarantee you they're looking at the performance of the business more often than once a quarter, right? And so they've
Without
had
your
90,
context.
they're looking at it every day, and they've had 90
Yeah.
days, 90 messages of this is what the business is doing. And if you come in with
Yeah.
one message at the end of the quarter that says, but we're doing great, that's not outweighing what's going on. So it needs to be there every day.
Yeah. They have access to Looker too.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just, yeah. And like to not, oh,
No, finance is by far one of the most important partners, right? At the end of the day, uh,
Yeah.
completely aligned with how Ben is describing the best operating model, the best way to build out an operating model with them. But also, it's about ensuring you have a very clear measurement framework. You've pre-aligned with the finance team on that. You're reaching out to them, communicating performance on a regular basis. At the same point of time, it's about helping them learn the work that you're doing and the impact that that is driving, but not explaining to them that they need to learn a new language. It's essentially just about, hey guys, how do you think about measuring OpEx? When you think about all the different teams that you're working with
Yeah.
internally in the company, are you looking at, hey, what's the ROI coming in? Are you looking at like at a cohort level, what is the ROAS, et cetera, and like just trying to understand how you can communicate your performance in the language that makes the most sense to the team.
Yeah. It's so like marketers love an acronym. We really do. We love an acronym. We love a lot of corporate speak sometimes when we're talking. And like when we're talking to each other, it's almost like a little code language, and that's okay. But like if we want to get buy-in from stakeholders around us, we should probably figure out ways to translate it to things that are important to them
Yeah.
and to the language that they use, right? And actually, Chirag, just curious, do you plan to increase, decrease, or maintain marketing spend this year? And like what factors are driving your decision for recommendations there?
I mean, so our marketing budget, we are scaling that in 2025. Multiple factors that are actually playing into that. At a very high level, firstly, just as we think about Reddit as a platform, we see strong momentum behind Reddit as a platform. Last year, Reddit was perhaps, if I'm not mistaken, the sixth most searched keyword on Google. And at the end of the day, we understand that our platform has perhaps the highest quality user-generated content and a repository of potentially any question or topic that you might be interested in under the sun, right? So as we are seeing this momentum behind the platform, we want to capitalize on that. So what does that really translate into, right? Like we are launching a bunch of new products and features, specifically on the B2B side to really help businesses grow and thrive on the platform. Last week, this was in the media as well to some extent, but we launched Reddit Pro. This is a free solution allowing businesses to create an organic profile on Reddit. They can see what conversations are happening on the platform, what are the trends, topics, brands that are being spoken about, and they get an opportunity to be part of that conversation in real time. So we have a bunch of these new product launches that are coming in. So marketing will be supporting those GDMs. So of course, we are looking at increasing the overall paid media spend that we have across different channels. We also see that there's a strong opportunity to go deeper into our existing channels. So there's a bunch of aggressive, high velocity testing plans that have been built out. Our goal really for this year is how do we go deeper into our larger channels when we think about Google, Meta, LinkedIn's, which are our high reach channels, and then really think about high velocity testing in a bunch of new channels to really understand what our tier two of evergreen channels could potentially look like, right? Uh, in terms of your question about like the decision criteria in terms of how do you decide that, it boils down to just the incremental value that we can get
Mhm.
from any of those budget increases that we are planning. And to the previous discussion that we were having, completely aligned with Ben's approach on that, like you need to have a very clear alignment internally with finance, with the right XFN teams on what are the goals that you are associating with that incremental marketing spend, and you keep a close tab on that on an ongoing basis. And as long as you're hitting those performance goals, then things should shape out fine.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It's funny, like these are the things that when you step back and you think about it at a broader level, it's like, well, of course, like everything you just said makes so much intrinsic sense. But then it's like the discipline of doing it day in and day out, month in and month out. And also applying it like when you're thinking about new channels. I know Matt, you mentioned earlier, reserving like 8 to 10% of your budget for new tests. How do you determine and this will be the last section or question for the section. We'll get straight into the next one about staffing. But how do you determine how much budget you want to allocate for incremental testing of a new channel?
So it really depends on the outcome that we're trying to drive, and you know, and the significance or the importance of the test. If it's a test that we really believe in and we need to show statistical significance, well, at like a 90% bar, well then, that means we're going to have to spend a bit more to get there. But, one of the leadership principles from Amazon that I try to I've really internalized in this scenario is the principle like leaders are right a lot. So it's our job to have good intuition and to take the data that's around us that might not be easy to synthesize and have a really good guess as to what's going to work. So, I try to marry that with like the science of like what is the result that I have to have and find it. But if you have $1 million marketing budget and you get 100 grand in testing for the year, that does limit the number of swings you're going to be able to take, right? So, you have to have an opportunity analysis and a list of tests that you want to run, and you have to weigh those those risks. Like, how many of these tests can I run at the bar they need to be run, and stack rank and go.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense. I think, and it also is like very much channel specific, and I recognize that, but I think that just the framework around that decisioning is helpful for people to hear. And also just thinking about, I'll actually get us straight into thinking about, designing our dream marketing team. The talent market is still predicted to be very competitive in 2025. And the best marketing talent will continue to have a lot of options, right? A lot of us, one of the things that I actually love the most about working at Right Side Up is how fluid it is sometimes, where consultants become clients move on, take a sabbatical, come back, and all of a sudden they're consultants. It's an interesting thing to be kind of always have a finger on my pulse of the marketplace. But even just thinking about budgeting, and Matt, I'll direct this at you again, but Ben, Drug, like happy for any of you to weigh in here. What's interesting is that a lot of marketers have developed their skills in these like very high resource environments with zero interest rates. I used to say that like for a second there, it felt like the hammer was a ton of media budget and the nail was any marketing goal. And all of a sudden it was just like, yeah, that's what we're going to do, or spend money. So what are your strategies for identifying candidates who can operate effectively in today's leaner, kind of more hands-on environment that's just a little more focused on responsible growth as opposed to growth at all costs?
So I think there's a narrative that like some people, I see it on LinkedIn, some people say you shouldn't hire anybody from a FANG company to come do your startup because they have no idea how to work in a resource constrained environment, or other people in FANG company are saying you shouldn't hire people from startups because they don't know. I think that's all a bunch of nonsense. It's really about how do people think, and trying to work through that in the interview process is part of our jobs. And I think it has been for me easy to identify the people who their strategy is just to spend more, rather than people who are really thoughtful around the kind of experiments that they're running. So when I'm interviewing folks, I like to ask about specific experiment setups, whether you got it right or wrong. I don't really care the result. Like, walk me through your testing methodology and how you like to scale things, and that tells me more than any of the other questions around like, is this person going to be able to function in an environment where we have to make do with that 10 grand. There's not another 10 that we can go ask. We have to make do.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I feel it boils down to, what are the core skill sets and what is the level of adaptability? I mean, Christina, to your earlier point, I think top talent always has a market, irrespective of how the industry, whatever sort of ups and downs the industry is going through. But yeah, as someone I started my career with startups. I was working with Rocket Internet based out of Germany, and, sort of a very lean environment. I joined Google. I worked there for 9 years. I was at Meta for 3.5 years, and now been here at Reddit for the last couple of months. Uh, if the core skill sets are there, if the adaptability element is in there, you have the right ingredients to think about, hey, yes, may not be as resource heavy as previous environments, but at the end of the day, there's a clear goal, there's a clear path to get there, and you're just trying to understand the best sort of investment allocation strategies from a marketing standpoint to get to that eventual goal, right? So that is my perspective on this.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And actually kind of gets to another point where it's like, even just thinking about when it makes sense to hire in-house talent versus hiring a consultant versus hiring an agency team. I mean, I have my own opinions about that, both having been in-house, having worked at agencies, now leading a team at a consultancy. But I'm just curious, like, how do you guys think about that? And really whoever wants to volunteer first. But yeah, how do you guys think about like when it makes the most sense to go with any one approach? And like, I will preface this by saying my bias is in-house first. And I don't think that anyone at Right Side Up would be, including Tyler, would be surprised to hear me say that, because I believe firmly that the best work happens in-house. But like, also, I don't know about you guys, I don't think there's a lot of like podcast advertising or Reddit ad specialists just chilling in house at a smaller startup, waiting for the day where their channel sees the light of the sun. So, yeah, how do you guys think about it?
I think about it in two ways, right? There's like a skill set, and then a time boundness, right? So
Mm,
if I need a skill set for a long period of time and I'm willing to commit to a long period of time, then yeah, you go hire the best person in house that you can reasonably afford, and you make that hire. The place where I like to flip it is that, like, this is a medium term project that, it's a pilot. It's, we need to get from 0 to 60 really quickly. Those are the places where I like to outsource, bring in people with specific skill sets that we only are going to need, maybe up to a year, depending on the project. But like, if it's under a year that I know I'm going to need that resource, then that's where, I think it makes the most sense to go with the consultant or agency route, depending on what skill you're looking for.
yeah,
One thing,
it's funny. Oh,
oh, sorry. I was going to say one thing I would add to this is, and I like what Chirag and Matt are saying in the framing of this. I do think that even in an entirely internally staffed company, right, communication can be a challenge across people. And so I have seen smaller companies attempt to kind of just piecemeal together a lot of fractional people, right, from
mm,
source A, source B, source C. And I think that can create new challenges in terms of communication. So if companies are looking to outsource, I do like to look to consultancies or agencies that have an expertise in a number of the domains that we're going to need in the next year, just to narrow those points of communication and make that cleaner. And it's not that I'm saying this is, it's an agency model where there's one person you talk to and then they go back and talk to everyone else. But
yeah.
if you are getting multiple experts in from the same organization and they are frequently talking to each other, I think that can help things move more smoothly in the organization. And those delays in communication are often the difference between, like, does the product launch this month or the campaign launch this month or 2 months from now, right? So that's definitely something that I think about. And to the earlier question on hiring, one of the things I look for, like, definitely the points about adaptability and how do they think about testing and prioritize things. I think that's all important. The other thing I look for is, what is this person trying, like, what are they excited about and what are they trying to achieve? And how does that align with the business need? Right? Because if you say, oh, this person's is like, I want to be the foremost expert, or among the foremost experts in this aspect of marketing, and that's a part of the business that we want to develop, that's great. That's someone that's going to work really hard, right?
Yeah.
And you're probably going to get a lot of mileage out of that. That's going to help the business. It's going to help, and it's going to help that person develop their career. And so I try and look for that strategic alignment whenever I can.
Yeah, your incentives are aligned. It
Yeah.
makes a ton of sense.
My 2 cents on this, I think it boils down to leverage. I like the framework that Matt is sharing here. You're thinking about, hey, duration of the program. You're thinking about skill set. If it's more dynamic, more short term, you think things will change over time. You end up working with a full service agency because you might need a channel marketer today. You might need an analytics specialist tomorrow. You might need creative support ongoing, so on and so forth. But realistically, as I even think about some of the most tenured programs that I am running right now or I've built out, there is the agency support element in there. For example, paid media, for example, SEO, right? So it boils down to leverage. Like in a particular situation, what makes you get to the goals that you have around the marketing program in the most efficient way? And I don't have a bias per se. I've been in environments where FTE heavy, agency light, FTE light, agency heavy, and it's very situational, I would say.
I couldn't agree more. I also tell people like the reason that Right Side Up has 7-day out clauses, which still people are like, you do, even on your business where it's like offline, you book it. I'm like, yeah, like that's how it works because things can change at that quickly of a clip. And I've had some offline engagements come in and it's like a 6-month engagement and we prove out some channels as proof positive, proof negative, et cetera. Wind up deprioritizing investment and then we'll pick up a year later, right? And then I've had others that literally I kicked them off when I was the only consultant here working on offline projects regularly and they still are with us. So I always tell people, I'm like, get a partner who can be with you for the long run if needed, but also like somebody who understands that you need the flexibility in your business because that was one of my biggest hangups when I was in house is like looking at agency contracts from the other end of things and being like, oh, wait, what do you mean I have to give you 60 days notice? I don't even know if I'm going to be investing in this channel in 60 days. Like just that like kind of flexibility. That's why I often will recommend the consultant route because you still want to make sure that you're working with people who are extremely experienced in what you're doing. Like you want some of that agency knowledge because like the last time I checked, none of us are trying to reinvent the wheel on how to execute in a particular channel or, like let's
Right.
learn from the mistakes of people that have been there and done that, but also like recognizing that we all work in, even at a scaled company, like we work in fast-paced environments where stuff changes on a dime. So working with a partner that understands that and can partner with you through those changes, I just think it's super important. Um, and
So
actually,
for you on this, Christina, it's like I think the bias that I have is then working with a partner who shares the same ethos as the team, and then they have the sort of full service model because you know that you can lean on them for a variety of different functions and support areas, right? It could be from channel expertise to analytics to creative, so on and so forth.
yeah, exactly. And like, I also, people are always like, well, how does Right Side Up do so many things in so many different channels? And like, are you just trying to like do it all? And I'm like, no, we have literally like 11,000 vetted marketers in our network that we know. I remember this early on. It was like, find the absolute best people at what they do and get out of their way and help them activate with brand. Like, that's literally it. And it's just like that commitment to just putting the best talent in the midst of the project that you're working on. I think if we all use that as our North Star, whether it's full-time in-house, whether it's agency, whatever, like if that's the lens that we're looking at staffing through, I think we'd just be very advantaged by that. And so I'm time checking us. I'm looking, I'm like, oops. I'm glad that we had a really good discussion around this. Reminder that everybody, feel free to come in on Q&A and in the chat here. Happy to pick up those questions. Going to get into AI a little bit here and just thinking about like harnessing AI as an ally in your marketing campaigns. I am always interested to talk to marketers about this because I feel like for a while there was a lot of crap on the internet about like AI is going to take all of our jobs. And it's like, well, I mean, if AI is going to take your job, like my guy or girl, like please do something else that can't be easily replicated by machine learning. Maybe think twice about that. I'm a big believer that like marketers who are harnessing the power of these tools will probably be more advantaged in the talent marketplace than marketers who don't. So I'll open this up. What are the tools that you find yourself using day in and day out? Like how often are you using AI? What tools and, language learning models and whatever, what are you using most and what features are you finding yourself using most?
I'll jump in. So using AI in a lot of testing and analytics, and whether that is testing from the standpoint of making creative variants. AI is not at a point right now where the final product, the final creative is coming from AI. But if you want to get a quick understanding of like, we're going to do some variations and what elements seem to pop and be more important so that we can then produce our like real ad. It's useful for that, both in terms of like Adobe and Ad Creative AI or tools for that. Also in terms of testing, like Swayable and Kantar have AI programs that you can kind of run some ad testing and get some quick feedback. So to your point, it's like, what can you do to make yourself more efficient, not to totally like replace something that you would do. It's how do you bring that timeline in tighter? And maybe you are doing testing where you might not have had the opportunity to do testing before in your ad creative. Other than that, I do see, leveraging ChatGPT for quick analytics on data sets, right, can just make things a little bit faster. And then on the B2B side, I see AI being used a lot for data augmentation, right? So interesting usage of like Bright Data, ChatGPT, a few other programs out there where you're saying, we've got this basic list of emails. We want to enhance it with other information so that our communications can be more personalized.
Yeah, makes sense.
On our side, I mean, as I think about it, the answer perhaps is like, how are we using and how often are we using AI? I think the answer is every day. There is the paid media platforms piece, which I think, knowingly or unknowingly has perhaps seen the most benefit of AI and machine learning over the last decade or so at this point of time. A lot of customer value that Google and Meta ads have created is literally on the back of machine learning models that now drive stronger and stronger efficiency gains. We see that on Reddit ads as well. We are now seeing a lot of the AI improvements being brought to the front end as well. So a lot of like creative generation, design better ads, and so on and so forth. And a lot of tools like even on Reddit ads, we have an AI model that is actually helping advertisers generate like better ads. So perhaps the largest part I would say in some shape or form is paid media platforms. Similar to Ben's points, there is a lot that is happening in the space around testing and improving the velocity and quality of testing that we can do. There's a bunch of tools out there, Mutiny, Optimizely, etc., which are leveraging AI to help us do DIY testing. I would add two more things on that. One is around lead scoring, similar to data augmentation, but it's really helping us go to the next level in terms of getting better insight about who we are bringing in and what treatment we should be offering to those folks. So sort of plays into the overall testing roadmap. Two things we are experimenting with is with email content generation and AI SDRs. Still, I would say early days in these fields. We haven't seen a lot of scalable proof points, but it's an area that we are very excited about. And then on a personal level, yes, ChatGPT every day. It's a thinking partner, it's a sounding board, and it's a source of learning. So yeah.
And I guess I'll go last, to Chirag's point, ChatGPT, it's just a force multiplier for me. Like I use it to synthesize information. Like I dump, if I get 5 different documents from from a deep dive that I'm doing, I can dump them into GPT and say, give me, synthesize this for me, and save myself, in some cases, hours of reading. It's really, really helpful. So that's personal. On the other front, I think, I like to use it right now. I'm starting to use it more for creative and content augmentation rather than creation. I don't like to use it for, I still think people are needed for the initial creative concepts or the initial copy. But one experiment that I'm in the midst of with a founder of a startup that I'm working with is to we wrote out 50 social media posts, for his catalog. But then we gave it a bunch more information about the company, all the product details, all of his biographic information, and then we gave it some additional posts of another thought leader who we really liked the tone of how he was speaking, and then that we fed that into the machine, and then to rewrite those posts, and we'll do another QA afterwards as they go, but
Yeah.
it just was such I mean, the amount of time that saved us, the amount of headache that saved us, and we got the tone right, using AI, and that's incredible to me. It's just incredible that the tech can pick up on the tone and start to change those things and augment what we're doing and improve it rather than do it for us. So that's how I'm using it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I appreciate the super helpful and very tactical recommendations here. I think that it's always easy to be like, I should be using AI, but I don't actually know how to use it more or better, or like the only thing I do with it is to like plus up my email drafts or, you know, make my stuff shorter or better or whatever, which is a valid use of it, I'd like to point out. But I'm gonna end us here. I'm going to, well, first I wanted to wrap up today's webinar. And if you have any questions that you think about after this, please feel free to reach out to us. You know, we're happy to follow up separately and respond. I would love your feedback about the webinar. In a moment, you're going to see a poll question appear and would love to let us know how you'd rate the session. And then while everybody's rating this, before we conclude, I wanted to share the next webinar that we're going to be hosting on Wednesday, February 5th. Actually, you're stuck with me again. I'm going to be joined by Brian Barletta from Sounds Profitable. We're going to be debating why going ad-free isn't really the answer for podcasts and how to balance ads with subscriptions to maximize revenue and trust and performance for advertisers. I'll send a link to the webinar. We'll send that in our follow-up email. With that, I just wanted to thank all of our panelists, Chirag, Matt, and Ben, for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. As a reminder, we're going to share the recording from today's webinar by tomorrow afternoon. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But thanks, guys, for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And yeah, good luck out there. Happy New Year.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for
Thanks,
having
guys.
us.
Having us.
Bye.
See you.